call the meeting, this special, wow. Let's call this special meeting to order. It's 3:35 on Thursday, the 15th of June. I want to remind you all, if you're speaking, you need to speak into a mic, so you'll need to either move the mic around or grab the other mic. This is a special agenda to discuss related to the operation and options for lease regarding a railroad museum located on city-owned property at 703 South Chaburn. There is no public comment today, so for those of you who might have come to listen to the proceedings, just know that you will not be allowed to make comment today. They can cheer if they want to, and we do enjoy that up here as well, so don't limit it to one side of the family. All right, so to start with, I guess what we need to do is just talk through where we're at. Obviously, there's a lease agreement that currently exists that has a expiration date in September 1st, September 15th. So today we will start the conversation about the contract. We will not be discussing any specific terms or agreement relative to that lease. We will just be having a discussion from City Council's perspectives as well as your Board of Directors and subjects related to that contract. All right. Who would like to go up first? Daniel, you want to start?
Mayor, again, thank you for that quick summary that you gave. Again, this meeting really is to get a general understanding of where the museum group is, and also to make sure that we're clear as far as our kind of expectations moving forward. We are talking about a long-term lease. It's a 20-year lease. So we want to make sure on our part that we're doing the responsible thing for our community. We do appreciate your efforts, which you've done with the museum as well. But on our part, we just want to make absolutely sure that moving forward, we have an agreement that both satisfies both parties, but also addresses some of the issues that we like to address as well. But with that said, I'd like to hand it over to the museum group and let's kick off.
No.
No.
Better now?
A little better.
Better now?
Better now.
Better now? There. I'm David Wood. I'm the president of the Historic Orient Santa Fe Depot Incorporated, which is the corporate name that was the 501c3 that leases the building from the city. We do business as, because nobody could figure out what that was, as the Railway and Heritage Museum of San Angelo. So that's what we go by in public, and people understand what goes on in that building that way. But our corporate name is the Historic Orient Santa Fe Depot Incorporated. We are a 501c3. The group was started shortly after the building was saved from being torn down. And their main mission was to save the buildings and get them from the deterioration mode that they were in. They worked for over 2 years doing that before a grant was found through TxDOT. And this was the first grant TxDOT had issued anywhere for a restoring of a depot for use as a museum and a bus depot. So actually the first they used for restoring a train depot for anything. So the museum board backed away, so to speak, after finding all the historic information and passing that on to the architect, who was did a wonderful job on making sure that the building inside and out looked like what it did when it was built back in 1910. And we have people that come in all the time that say, my dad worked here. There's one gentleman back here that came in. I used to run around barefoot when I was a kid. My dad worked upstairs, and he was a train master, roadmaster, and he would go and visit all these, and Larry started naming off all these people and stuff, and that's part of the fun. That's where we get paid. There's no salaries paid. We're all volunteers. We're at a point where that needs to change. We have evolved the museum. It's grown from 2 rooms originally to 3, 4 rooms, and then the whole building, as the city bus depot was closed down about 10 years ago after the contract for the grant they got was up. We want to expand the history portion to include a lot of the land on the other side of the railroad track. There's a museum outside of town that has got a lot of things that came from Fort Concho when Fort Concho went through a period where they divested themselves of anything that didn't have basically to do with Indian wars for it. And the Barrows Museum in Eola has been closed because it's out in the middle of nowhere and nobody knows where it is. I think they had 6 people the last year, and they're willing to help us out, bring in some of the things that were here in San Angelo so we can display them too. That's our plans, and our plans are also to hire a full-time director that keep the continuity between the board of the volunteer board going throughout the years. And in most nonprofits, a director like that is expected to help raise about 3 times their salary, 3 to 4 times their salary. And so that will be one of the criteria we set for them, is to help put on some fundraising programs that we don't have going right now. And we've got several that we'd like to start with. We've already come up with several. The recent San Angelo Gives Day, we participated for the first time last year and raised about $13,000. This year, we raised over almost $15,000. It's not quite $15,000, and but we put out a memo that all the money raised would be put into escrow. That if for some reason we are not able to negotiate and get a lease, that we will return the money back to the people, because the board does not feel right taking someone's money if we're not able to continue. 9 months ago, we started negotiating with the city staff, talking to them. Our main thing was that we cannot get, and for the last 3 or 4 years have not been able to get any funding from foundations, because they will only fund you if you have a long-term contract. And 3 years left on the contract, they said, we can't fund you until you get a renewed contract. So there's quite a bit of money that is available out there. We would like to continue the partnership with the city. The city wrote the original contract 20 years ago, and we would like to continue that partnership and with that contract and that verbiage with the basics that's in it now, which the basics are the city will maintain the outside of the building, the parking lot, the elevator maintenance, which is about $3,500 a year, the air conditioning systems, which, as you noticed when you went upstairs, they have not worked in 20 years. They just weren't designed well to start with, and they're old systems that take the old type Freon that's not going to be available very much longer. We went out and got bids or estimates. They weren't bids. We got estimates for putting in a high-efficiency system that can be zoned, so different areas that you saw today at the depot can be turned on during the week when we're the staff is down there, the volunteer staff is working on something, and we don't have to turn on 24 tons of air conditioning. And the system is a 19.9 SEER as versus the 8 SEER system that is currently there. One of the big things is in commercial property, and I did not know this before, but commercial property is charged a demand rate on electricity. And whatever the highest is during that quarter, you're charged that. That's where you start. And ours starts at about $256 a month before we turn on one light. And we average a little over $600 a month throughout the year, just turning the air conditioners on 1 day a week. We hope with the new system that we will be able to afford to open up more days a week. Our goal is to open 5 days a week. I've been in contact with the Chamber of Commerce and the Visitors Bureau, and they said that would help promote the museum a lot more, and that's one of the goals that we're shooting for. It would bring in some money. It won't bring in 5 times more money, because still I've talked with the fort and the art museum, and the majority of all the people that come through on Saturday. So that would probably still remain about 60 to 80% of the total people would still come through on Saturday. But we would like to open it up. Another reason is I'd worked with the Moody Foundation before, and we had a board member that worked on the Moody Foundation to get money from people, those big foundations like that. You need to be open 21 hours a week. So that is another reason why we would like the air conditioners working where we can be open more.
Harry, would you like to say something?
Thank you. I appreciate it, Mayor. I've been working with David and his group since last summer, quite honestly. This is in the middle of District 3, my district. And I think there's been some miscommunication, some misconceptions about what the city was trying to do and what the Railroad Board, Museum Board was trying to do. Quite honestly, I don't think anybody sitting on this side of the table or at these 2 tables down there intentionally thought that we were going to close that museum. So I don't know where that came from. That's another one of those fake news stories. Bottom line is I think this organization has done some good things, and I think if they really have a plan to expand the hours out there, then I think it can be taken to the next level. But what I told David way back late last year was unless they can do public-private partnerships like's been done over at the fort, never going to be successful, because the city is not going to be able to completely help the museum based on the amount of visitors that they've got today. So if we can help extend this contract, get it out there, and that helps you find some funders, then I think this particular group is willing to do that. Details, I'll let everybody else work on that. But the bottom line is I don't think anybody up here wants to close a museum. I think it's a gem for San Angelo, but we've got to work it in such a way that everybody's comfortable. Got to remember that we're utilizing taxpayers' money to do this, and not everybody is a railroad fan. So we've got to do it in such a way that helps you do what you need to do, but still leaves that particular building and that organization as a gem in West Texas, in San Angelo, Texas.
We never told anybody that y'all were not going to continue the lease. I mean, it's in the current lease that the lease can be continued and stuff. I think some people misunderstood some stuff, but we have presented to, I think, Carrie, you were in the meeting. We would like to get, once we get a long-term lease, we can't get it without it. I've already approached 3 foundations, and they're willing to donate somewhere between $50,000 and $75,000 that we will donate or give to the city to help in some of the capital improvements like the air conditioning system that is needed. So we're wanting to partner that way, plus all the money and time that we put into running the museum itself, which has been a lot over the years. We put in tens of thousands of dollars that we've raised over the years, and hundreds of thousands of hours.
Just for clarification, David, and you have those figures, you've shared them with many of the people up here. The media's in the room today, you've got people in the audience. What are those numbers for the air conditioning, taking care of the parking lot, and redoing the windows?
The city has had on their capital improvement budget, which anybody can go online and read. This is the page for the depot. And there's a separate line item budget under the capital improvement for HVAC system, air conditioning system. Both of those, as far as I can tell, have been on the budget for at least 8 years, and it's exactly the same. It's the only thing that changes is the top, it looks like, the date. Every year, though, when it comes to council, it's on the list, and there's a column Y for yes, we have money, or N, we don't have any, we haven't found any money. And for 8 years, those have been on the council approval, and they approve the ones, of course, that have money. They don't approve the ones that don't have money. I suggested that the museum qualifies for the hotel motel tax. Instead of taking money out of the general fund for some of the maintenance that's been done in the past, that if you take it out of that, it will help keep the general fund down. Dollar-wise, just a second. I'm running out of throat. The HVAC system, and this is for a high quality, top of the line that can be zoned and high efficiency that will cut our bill by a third on the electricity, so we can open more, and it will keep the building at whatever temperature we set it at. Last night we turned it on and it was 85 degrees upstairs still, even though the thermostat was set at 75. This estimate is $76,881. I'm not sure, I don't have the city's estimate on what their estimate for replacing it that they've had for 8 years on the budget but haven't found the money for.
I guess I was just referring to the numbers that you shared with this group up here. So 76.8 there. Then you had some cost on the parking lot and some cost for the windows.
$76,881 for the air conditioning system. For quality striping, which does lots of parking lots in town, to clean the parking lot, to put tar down in all the cracks, to put 2 coats on the west side, which is where the buses tore up the parking lot, and put 1 coat on the east side, would be $6,230. And I believe the city budget was $36,000 for doing that, but they are looking at doing a gravel and tar type, like they do on the streets, seal coating, which would last longer than this. It's not as pretty as this, and you're liable to pick up tar walking across it and carry it into the building, just like you do when you walk in the streets. The other is for adding storm windows to the outside of the building, and this would be single pane, well, double pane, single sheet, without a frame, with or without an outside frame, so you can still see the original 1910 windows that are up there. The windows would be sealed. The old windows would be sealed completely. There's a lot of windows and a lot of leakage of air and dust into the building. And the cost for that is $36,245.
That will cover all the windows that you have?
That would cover, there are very few windows that are right over the doors because of the way they're built. They cannot put those on there where the little square windows that are about that big a square are. But otherwise, all the windows upstairs and downstairs, and it would include a coating on the windows that keeps 98% of the UV from coming in, which is a problem when you have a museum, to keep that UV light from deteriorating the pictures and stuff that we have on display. So that would cut that out. It would cut a lot of the reflective out, but mostly that leakage that goes on. We have some windows that are the permanent top windows that are down ½ an inch. And we have tried putting those back up. We've broken a couple windows. We replaced them. But it's just very hard to get those up and sealed again, a 107-year-old building.
Well, the reason I asked the question is we just came from the Railroad Museum, and quite honestly, there was a lot of heat coming through those windows on the doors, and that's what I'm asking you. The windows on the doors, is this all also included in this $36,000?
Most of the windows on most of the doors would be. There's a couple that wouldn't. But the majority of the heat that is coming through is from the windows themselves, not the doors, not the windows on the doors.
Charlotte, do you have some comments?
Well, first off, I wanted to say thank you. I'm presuming that you are the museum board, this body that's sitting before us, the museum board. And
Majority of it.
Tickled to
we've
death
got a
to see
couple
you
missing.
here today and to work with us and talk with us. And I need to clarify something for either my understanding or for all of our understandings. What was just being discussed are intricate details of what is needed to go on, which can be worked out at staff. But the public, unfortunately, thinks the capital improvement plan is a slam dunk, it's going to get done. And that's not what the capital improvement plan is. Matter of fact, the capital improvement plan wasn't even born until about 5 years ago, 5, 6 years ago, something like that. It hadn't been that long. And it is our city's wish list of what we feel can reasonably be done if we had funding. We never have funding. You know, some years we have good years and we can see our way through to get to some of those highly ranked as first come that's on the CIP, or important safety issue on the CIP, or to move forward with it. It's been a dream. Number one, I'm a railroad fan. I want to be the conductor on the train that goes through San Angelo. I believe in San Angelo's history, and I believe the railroad is where our history started. So I don't think there's anyone on this council, and y'all can hold your hand up if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's anyone up here who doesn't feel the same way. We believe in it, we support it, we want it. What it comes down to is a matter of monies, and who's in control of spending the monies and who's responsible for what. That's what it comes down to. We can sit up here and spend, this isn't Saturday, is it? It's whatever day it is. We can spend the rest of the afternoon hashing over who's responsible for this and who's responsible for that, and quite frankly, I don't care. What's past is past, can't be undone. I want to see us move forward, and I want something good to come from it. So that whatever the city should have, could have done, throw out the window, and whatever the board should have, could have done, throw out the window. Make this a learning experience. The rest of our boards for all of our San Angelo facilities, our buildings, It's the same out at the Coliseum. It's the same over at the fort. It's the same. They have needs. They're old buildings. They're historical buildings. And quite frankly, guys, City Hall was literally falling down around us. There was only a prayer that was keeping that building standing before it was redone. It just took money. So where we can do, what we can do, I'm interested in hours of operation, how many days a week. I am interested in maintaining the history of the building. Now, our Fort Museum Board, it's harder than the devil to get anything done because that board has such strict requirements for what goes into update. And getting a new window over there would take an act of the good Lord, I do believe, because meeting the requirements of old. But that has combined with meeting the requirements of what can be efficiently ran and operated. That's the case. You know, I want a show place for San Angelo. The building's old. It leaks like a sieve with dust and dirt, and it's dirty. You can't go through without getting nasty or dirty, and that's not what I want people to leave with when they come in, to see that building and to relive the history and the struggles that had to, don't get me started on history, but what they had to go through to just get to the railway platform in San Angelo, Texas, to get the railroad to begin with. That's what we all need to be interested in. And I think staff is perfectly capable of working out the parameters of the contract as long as we tie down exactly how it's to be maintained, exactly how it's to be operated, and the hours of operation. And then the board is responsible for raising your funding and your financing for any other extras and stuff that goes over there. But as I was walking through, I've got to ask, while it's my turn to speak, I've got to ask right quick, where is the existing record of all of the donations of these displays kept, as to who owns them? Where is that kept?
They're in books, 3-ring binders, and it is being transferred. We bought a special program for museums that we paid $2,600 for. And
Okay, I'm just going to say one word. I'm just going to say one word. Lily's ownership of the records as to who owns those various, I saw some lovely names of different counties, different people. That is their ownership, and it's on loan to, is it on loan to the city? Is it on loan to the museum board?
It's on loan to
Where's the contract
museum
for
board.
that? And those things bother me, and I want that cleaned up and cleared up moving forward.
Charlotte, there's very few things that are on loan. Most everything, most museums try, like Fort Concho, if you take something on loan, then you're responsible for it.
Yes, I know.
So
that's the
we
reason.
take-
That's the reason
we
I was
like to-
asking. But I saw lots of placards and cards on loan by this family, that family. You know, you can go down to Sonora to their little museum, and the different things, you know, on loan by. But those records in the keeping, you know, the city's got to be made aware and kept date of that. Otherwise, the amount of dollars we do or don't have, and the suggestions as to where we can get the dollars and the shared dollars, is for a later date to be done. But the contract terms and the expectations by both parties is what I thought we were here for today, because I really don't want to spend the rest of the afternoon talking about shoulda, coulda, wouldas, and he said and she said. That's my feeling on today's matter.
Is the depot a registered facility, the National Historic Register?
It's one of the first things the group did was get it on the National Register and the State Register of Historic Places. That means that, and I was surprised to find this out, that means the outside of the building cannot be added on to or changed.
Correct.
Now, the windows I've already checked, and the storm windows can be put over, since the original windows would show through it. That's not the optimal way to do it, but to replace the current windows like you all did at the city with those high-dollar windows that look like the original ones is about 10 times more money. So we're talking about 200 and some thousand versus 39,000.
Do we have a lease with anybody else that's $1 a year?
We do actually, and Cindy can speak to that actually as far as the leases that we do have with other entities or nonprofits or what have you that do pay $1 a year, and they cover all the maintenance costs and everything else.
So when they're $1 a year, you'll tell us what they have to pick up in terms of maintenance in order to get $1 a year lease?
Yes, ma'am. We currently have 9 leases that are $1 a year. Those leases, none of those the city provides maintenance on. A lot of them do require that the tenant actually put the improvements on and maintain the improvements.
What is the term of those?
I'm sorry, I don't have the terms of them, but some of the tenants, Boy Scouts of America, Girl Scouts, Howard College, Williams Halfway House, YMCA, San Angelo Emergency Corps, the Symphony, Stevens Library, and then the College Hills Library. The city also owns the property for the College Hills Library.
What about the soccer fields and the baseball fields?
The soccer fields are actually owned by the Bureau of Reclamation. The city leases those, and then they are subleased.
And the city furnishes all the water and the maintenance on the fields, or not?
I don't have information on Parks and Rec. That would be under Carl White.
But really, the leases you're talking about are buildings,
Yes, ma'am, they're
Leases that-
structures.
are structures. Right. So the question I have is based off of, and you might review the past 5 years of fundraising and donations that have been made by this board. Can you update everyone here in terms of the amount of dollars that have been raised through fundraisers as well as the dollars from donations? The issue is, as I understand, that when you only have 2 to 3 years left on a lease, of course, very few foundations and boards will have a conversation with you but this lease has been a 20-year lease. And so the question mark is, in 20 years, it hasn't always only had 2 to 3 years left on the lease. So what grants, what foundations have been applied to and to help facilitate some of the preservation, maintenance facilities that are there? And then with you, when you start talking about existing history of donations and fundraisers, what would be the dynamic that would change that you would now be able to raise enough money to hire an executive director?
One of the big dynamics that is changing is the 2 people that we have sitting down here that are under 50. As you all know, it's hard to get young people on your boards, and we've got 2 really great ones. Lane at the end is, by the way, the mayor of Sterling City, and he went through, and when he was a kid, through the museum, and that got him so excited that he majored in history at Texas Tech. And Brandy, you can speak for yourself.
I can. I think y'all have even noticed it because discussions have been going on for quite a period of time. I'm sure you've noticed that there's a change in energy here. And there's a big change in energy because you have people who have the knowledge and the energy because, yes, we are under 50, but we're also in that period of time in our lives where we do enter leadership, which I think I touched on the last time I got to meet y'all, where we can actually build traction. So we can create a long-term, set maybe a date for, a year from now to get to a point of fundraising where we can not only take over, and we've discussed it, a great portion, if not all of maintenance, where we can take over a great portion, if not most of capital improvements, and where we can also not only develop the museum to be a place that we now have the ability and the energy and the hours and the manpower to make it something you're extremely proud to walk in and out of, but something that San Angelo can just really, put up on a pedestal to help encourage commerce and tourism in San Angelo, which is a big part of, I don't know about y'all, it's a big part of what I know goes into my business as well, which gives me the ability to do this. So I think a lot of it is having people I mean, I love every one of you guys, but I'm guessing that I have a huge amount of skill sets and knowledge that they don't have about marketing, about creating events and other things that start creating interest and start building a higher amount of people who do walk in, so that we do become something that can be used as an advertising point for San Angelo. And I think that's the big change.
David, my question was, how much money have we raised over the past 5 years in the donations? Because, once again, when we take a look at it, we say,
In the last 2 years, we have not raised anything because the short term left on the lease from foundations.
fundraisers are not foundations, so that's grants.
I'm
So,
just, on foundations, prior to that, we've raised about $35,000 from the Tucker Foundation. We honestly haven't gone after a lot of money because we make enough money to keep the doors open and keep it running. And so we haven't gone after extra money. We've been
even
building
though
up
we knew we needed repairs to the building, the interior, so,
for the,
yeah.
well,
So
the-
the question is you didn't try to raise any money.
over and above what was needed to
Your
run
overhead.
the museum. Each one of the models that y'all saw upstairs cost around $10,000 to $12,000 each to build, not including man hours. There's a lot of things that we have bought that's on display that has not been donated. We maintain the inside of the building, which has been expensive on some areas of that. But no, we haven't. And I have talked with both the Area Foundation and the Health Foundation and some other foundations that if we get a long-term are willing to donate some money so that we can raise it to help the city fund the air conditioning, which is the number one goal from a standpoint of maintenance, is people cannot go up there and when it's 85 degrees and we've had it running since yesterday.
I'm a big believer, as most of you know, in all things historic, and I'm a major believer that tourism is an important part of what makes up San Angelo to be the city that it is. And I'm also a big believer that when you are a board member and when you have in your possession at a very inexpensive rate, that you would work as hard as you could to raise as much money as you could to take care of this historic, incredible thing that we have. Because what's of greatest value is that building.
It really makes me
Yes.
excited that we get to partner on this in the future with y'all's intention to have the museum there, our ability to negotiate what's needed and what we can facilitate and commit to. Now that they have people that aren't older and do have the energy, that do have the capabilities and the skill sets to do exactly that.
I just know it can't be a one-man or two-man band, because one-man and two-man bands can't make that difference happen. It's got to be a team of people. It's got to be a lot of people working together in order to make it happen. So I respect that we have a couple new young people, and I know that your energy and efforts will make a difference, but you can't do it alone. And there's obviously a lot that has to be done there. And
got-
you look at the dynamics, and I want to make sure that when we talk about the future, that future is attached to some dynamics that say, we're just trying to survive, because we got to do more than just survive day in and day out. We've got to, if you're proud of it, show it. You
We're
got to
proud of
show you're proud of it. And if you're only raising enough money to take care of basic maintenance issues, you're not taking care of the proud thing that that building is.
We spend around $20-some thousand a year, which goes into, most of it to electricity and to the maintenance of these and upkeep of the building on the interior and the exterior. We spray, the city does not spray the weeds in the parking lot and stuff. We have been doing that for 20 years to keep that down.
Old buildings are expensive. Lucy, you have a question?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I wanted to ask you, David, I agree with the mayor, I agree with Charlotte and what they've said, and I know we can't go back, but I just want to know if I got this right. Did you say in the last 19 years, how much money have y'all brought together or had or have to date?
In the last
19 years, since our lease is going to be up and your lease is going to be up in September. So I'm wanting to know how much money have you raised? How much money have you gotten from grants? How much money has it all been in the last 19 years that you've brought in that show what you have been doing in the last 19 years?
I honestly, it's probably close to whatever about 20 times 20 is. $400,000, 20,000 times 20 has been raised on top of another 30,000 worth of grants, so about $430,000. But in the same time, there's been about 860,000 hours at $22 an hour is what the IRS credits a volunteer hour for that has been spent at no cost, you know. But we've had the volunteers that have come in and done that work. We don't pay anybody to build the train layouts or maintain the outside of the mowing and stuff we did for the first 10 years. When the bus depot was there, because they didn't have the budget to do it, so we maintained it. And so whatever is needed, we do. And
I also wanted to ask, has it always just been open on Saturdays from 10 to 4?
yes, ma'am, except for during December. And during December, starting the Saturday after Thanksgiving, we open up from 6 to 9 on every Friday and Saturday evening. Fundraising-wise, that is, we raise about close to 35% of the total funds are raised in the month of December. Just like many retail businesses, most of their money is in December. But with our Santa Fe Christmas that we have every year, and a lot of you have come and read stories to the children that we have every night at 7 o'clock. But on Saturdays and Fridays from 6 to 9, plus the Saturday from 10 to 4. What we would like to do is be open, if we can get where it's comfortable enough to be open, Sundays, Thursdays, Fridays, and probably Wednesday.
I was just wondering if you had any kind of field trips that the children from elementary would come through.
We have 20 or 30 a year of children coming in. We've got one next weekend from a church summer camp. We usually have several of those during the summer. We had 100 pre-K kids that were extremely well behaved from El Dorado 4 weeks ago. Right before the end of school, we usually have 2 or 3 a week that come in.
We have a lot of short-term changes that need to be made to hit some of those things. And one of the things I've already kind of developed a program for us to put in place once we do go forward into the next lease period is a way to capitalize on getting more field trips there. More events there like they do in December that bring in a lot more traffic. And being an operations manager for multiple businesses, I have the ability to put all of those things in place while not having to do the work myself, being able to delegate. So I do have a lot of plans for that kind of thing because we do have hot buttons. Our hours, we could increase the amount of grants we could get once we get hours in a lease. Things like that, being able to have volunteers. We have a lot of volunteers that come from the base. It's a huge thing for them because a lot of them are just graduating, and that's like one of the few places they get to go. So it's a neat pleasure, but being able to not only increase that, but other volunteer groups that I've been connecting to. Again, a lot of these things can't be done until we know what our lease is going to be in our lease period, but I'm already working on a lot of those things so that we can hit those hot buttons and really do get a chance to change it around.
Do you have a rough estimate on how much you can apply for the grants once you have a lease in place, especially being on the National Historic Registry? What would that number look like? Have y'all what specific
I talked
ones have y'all
to
researched?
the heads of both the Health Foundation, the San Angelo Foundation, and they said these programs of the air conditioning, installation, and stuff would definitely be in that, where they would put money into. And I talked to them in the neighborhood of $25,000 to $50,000 each. They could not say other than that is something we would definitely look at, because they're not the board. Their boards would have to vote on that. But as that will be one of the first things we do once we get the lease, is go to those foundations and some others and trying to get some additional money for helping in the air conditioning.
What about at the federal level?
The federal level's sort of drying up. A lot of that has to come through because the building's owned by the city, just like the money for the restoration had to come through the city because it had to go through the owner of the building. Some of that we may be able to find. It might have to be, and we could sure use the help from the city and the staff's knowledge of how to get some of that funding too. The half-cent sales tax is another thing that may be able to help out. But federal funding and state funding mostly are going to have to go to the owner of the building. They don't fund for a lot of ongoing. They fund more for capital improvement type things. So I think, Dane, you mentioned that it's a lot easier too the other day to get the capital improvement monies than it is the ongoing day-to-day maintenance monies.
And I'm sure y'all have a grant writer that, you know, if one of us need to be like point of contact to work out leg work and then work on technicalities on getting grants written and pushed through, that, I mean, that's certainly something we're very capable of.
I'm still hearing a lot about grants, and as far as the fundraising, our biggest concern, of course, and I love what you're saying as well. I think that definitely you do need to step up your game. But when you start looking at, and Charlotte, I'm sorry, I know you mentioned about the history and all that, but in order for us to have confidence moving forward, we want to make absolutely sure that history doesn't repeat itself. You know, so when we start looking at funding, it can't just be the grants, but it also has to be the fundraisers that you do as well. David, you talked about this being on the CIP for the past 8 years as far as those improvements. And as Charlotte mentioned a while ago, CIP is really just a plan. It's not really a funding mechanism.
Not an obligation.
It's not an obligation, no. So on our parts, you know, as far as working on, even back then, 8 years ago, working on those grants would have been wonderful, you know, to help leverage those monies. I know that some of the projects that we've had on the CIP have moved up at the top of the list because we receive monies from other entities as well. So we leverage those monies. So again, we start looking back at that past, and I just want to throw that out here right now because the past, you know, 5 years ago, and I was going through the San Angelo Cultural District Planning Study, and one of the goals that you stated even back then was that you wanted to acquire adjacent properties in the neighborhood nearby. You wanted to create a transportation museum. That was 5 years ago. And what progress has been made there? Again, all that goes toward the fundraisers, the monies that need to be raised in order for you to have a successful operation. And I do mention the cultural district because the depot is a big part of that. And we need to start making sure that we have a shared vision for what that depot can become in association with all the wonderful assets that we have in that district. So again, I hate to bring up the past, but we just don't want the past to repeat itself. And we want to make sure that there are options, not just, you know, the city can fund everything at this point, but there has to be options where you come forward and say, hey, this is our plan. We have an operations plan. We have an interpretive plan for how the information is going to get out to people for the museum. There's a lot of information, quite frankly, that we still need. Now, this lease doesn't end until September 15th. So we do have some time to work on that. And even then, we can actually extend on a month-by-month basis until we're comfortable that moving forward, we have an agreement that the city feels, we're actually doing everything we can to highlight that asset and do some wonderful things along with the cultural district.
We have a couple of landowners that we've already talked to that are going to be donating some of the properties over there. But they, again, wanted to see a long-term lease so that we were going to be viable for a while. I can't say who they are right now, but some of that property between the railroad tracks and Washington Street, we're wanting to get all of that. We don't want to really make it public a lot because then the prices will go up on those that we might have to buy. But at one time we were working with the city, and they were going to work on, because some of them were behind on their taxes and stuff, helping get some of that land through that. We have some corporate donors. That is one of the things that we are going to really increase working on. We've got a newsletter that's going to be starting to come out that will help generate more memorials and donations through items like that. We want to pick up our memorial donations, our membership, add to the membership considerably. With a newsletter coming out, that should help do that. We've got a huge database of people that have been volunteers, that have gone through the museum and stuff like that. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't leave that go through the museum contact information other than their town and things like that. But we have got plans for membership, corporate sponsorship, and several other things. Once we get the projects, we have a what do you call it? What do you call those things that you make?
What things I make?
It goes up on the screen.
Oh, an LED sign.
Yeah, but a presentation we've got made up on the expansion that we've already taken to a couple of the large donors in town that are very interested in making donations for helping of the expansion of the museum. Again, one of our second goal after the air conditioner is to get a hired staff person that can help direct us and focus us more on donating, and they can work 6 days, 5 or 6 days a week that can be up there to get the kind of funds it's going to take to
I want to
expand
repeat
and
what
keep it going.
Daniel has said. You've had the luxury for 20 years of $1 a year lease. And very few people get that luxury, $1 a year for a lease. And so, only recently, I guess because the lease is about to expire and we're negotiating going forward, is all of these ideas and these thought processes and these creative ideas and energy coming forward now at the end of a 20-year lease. And so to repeat what Daniel has said, dynamics change everything. And we need to make sure that one understands you don't get $1 a year leases with no expectations that go with it. That is a luxury that I don't know anybody who owns a valuable historic property would agree to that kind of a lease. So we need to make sure that we are comfortable with the city's ownership of that building, and that as we move forward, we keep the historic value and the building and the history that goes with it. It's precious, and we all think it's precious. It's so precious, we want to make sure that the decisions that are made going forward ensure that 20 years down the road, we have a building we're proud of, a tenant that has as much pride and willingness to work hard, raise the money, get the grants, get the donations that it needs to be something we're all very proud of.
I was going to say, I can really appreciate your position as having to be responsible towards the citizens of San Angelo for a property. And I get it exactly. You don't want us to come up here and promise things to you.
We don't want it at the end of the lease with the pressures on.
Right. And I know it's at the end of the lease, but I think one of the things that really shows that there is currently a culture change in this group, which is obviously what was necessary, is you look at the San Angelo Cares dollars from previous years to this year. And those dollars came because of those guys' efforts. I didn't do that. He didn't do that. New Energy didn't do that. And I know its timeliness just seems, like, well, and I understand that. So if it's needing our short-term, our midterm, and our long-term goals put on paper and described in a way where we can be held accountable, which is what I think I'm hearing, because
Very much
y'all
so.
need us to be accountable to you and the citizens because you're accountable to them.
We've allowed you the luxury of that
Right.
building, and we need to make sure that the people we've selected to be accountable for that building
Absolutely.
are truly that.
And
Here-
I can appreciate that.
Harry, I think you had a question.
Well, I think probably she just answered what I was going to ask. I encouraged David about 8 or 9 months ago that he needed to strengthen his board because I thought his volunteers on Saturday were volunteering, and that was basically what they were doing. Basically, the Railroad Museum was being driven by David himself, and I told him he needed to get some more energy on the board, and obviously he went out there and did that with you two. I would say this, if you're going to be successful, you need to have 2 or 3 more just like you on there to do what you need to do. You got to remember that a lot of the donations, or excuse me, a lot of foundations will support brick and mortar. They're not going to support typically hiring an executive director. So you're going to have to do that on your own. You're going to have to find that way. I've been on too many boards in this community, so I know the process. I take some direction both from 2 other people in the cultural district, Bob Bluehart and the museum director.
Howard.
Because both of those individuals really have already done what you're trying to do. They put the plan out there. They've gone ahead and done that. Mr. Bluehart's got 3 projects right now. 2 of them will be funded by private dollars. And so it can be done. You just got to have the right people and the right motivation and those people that can go out and do that. But what you said, put those goals down, get those back, showing it, so we can hold your feet to the fire because you're absolutely correct. We're responsible. For the rest of the
We have
citizens,
2 more
we're taking
people, by the
taxpayers'
way.
money to do what we need to do.
Charlotte, you had comment or question?
Well, not everybody is a fan of the railway or the depot, but everybody pays taxes here in San Angelo. And that's what we up here have to be responsible for and say what can and can't be spent on. But I have to ask you, and I'm not being ugly, I'm truly not, I'm trying to make this point. What do y'all, the 4th of July, what do y'all have planned, your Santa Fe Depot has planned?
We don't.
We don't. Okay,
We
I know
have-
the last 4 or 5 years, that you've been looking for money and funds, but I can tell you that I, for one, would rather buy a ticket from the Santa Fe Depot, not anything against the Symphony Board or the Museum Board or anybody, but those tickets are quite expensive, but to be able to sit at the east end, northeast end of the Santa Fe Depot with my lawn chair or your lawn chair and have wine and cheese and watch the 4th of July fireworks
That
and
is an
listen to the
awesome
music.
idea.
You could do it. You could make a tremendous amount of fundraising money. That's your job. That's not our job. But that money goes to maintain year in and year out, and you've got to do it every year. That's what we're trying to tell you. We can't give you money to do this. You have to. And they make their substantial annual operation funds, I would chance to say the museum board at least 5-6 years in advance, in reserve. And when you have that money in reserve earning interest for you, more people are going to be more apt to say yes on any hot money or going before half-cent sales tax because you're providing a plan and working on a plan. The hardest thing I learned my very first year in this office, I went to Washington, D.C., have to tell you, and asked for something from State Representative Michael Conaway. He got up from his desk and he came around. He said, well, let's talk turkey. What are you doing to earn it? And that's what I say to you. Instead of expecting the city to bail you out and to bail out the depot, which I want to see the depot survive, but what are you doing to earn those dollars to make it work? And that's where we are, if I'm correct.
We
you,
have
Charlotte.
7 special events a year that we have that are fundraisers. Some we're open to the public for free, and we do that 3 times a year where we're open to the public for free. But that's not a fundraiser. Your idea is great. We do something in July, at the end of July, 4th of July. We thought about renting the parking lot out for parking space because there's no parking space around with 30,000 people going down to the river stage. But that's a good idea. And we've got someone on our board heads up KCSA that broadcasts that, and I bet he could help us set up some good speakers and stuff so you could hear the music live right there at the parking lot.
I think that we've probably, wait a minute, Tommy, you have,
If
please.
we're to the
No,
end,
no, honey.
if we're to the end, I want to just kind of, I'll say end with my comments. Not that I'm the wrapper-upper, but
I'll wrap it up, but you go make comments.
okay. I think we're at the point. I hear everyone wanting to move forward. I don't hear anybody not wanting to do that. We can negotiate, I'm going to say, almost anything in a lease. Almost anything that both parties enter into that negotiation in good faith and then agree on those terms. I think that's where we are. We're just going to have to sit down with whomever they select as their reps, whomever we select as ours, and, just really go to work and come up with those terms. I just made a list here, and I'm not a real estate person, believe me, but I just made a list of what I consider flexibility offered to both parties. Now, the museum folks may not agree with any of the things on my list. If I presented them to the council may say, no, I don't agree with that either. But to me, we can come up with something that is of benefit for both groups because, again, we can put anything into a lease if we both do it in good faith that I think then can hold everyone accountable and move us forward and develop the expectations.
Any other comment from the council? Any other comment from your board?
I just want to make sure, because I do believe, and again, I really respect, again, your responsibilities. So I want to make sure that I do have a good grasp of the things that y'all need so you can start that negotiation in good faith on behalf of the citizens of San Angelo with us for the lease. I know that you need a short, mid, and long-term plan for improvements for the depot that hit all of the hot buttons as to hours, donations, fundraising, grants, and just regular operation hours. I did recognize that Charlotte also asked that we have a system or a better way, or at least have a written stone plan of how we're taking records that are kind of in a book and handwritten of what things are and aren't donated, whatever assets we have, and get those in a more structured, more professional manner so that it can be something that's looked through if somebody asks for it. And if there's anything I missed, I want to make sure that I get that because, again, being on the board and kind of talking, I'm making a promise myself, and I don't want to come back in 5 years and be told that you felt like I didn't hold up my bargain because it's important to me too.
We've got, yes, sir, please.
The microphone.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And I'd like to add as well with her, we are both very new to this board, less than a month on this board, so I'm very well taking as much information that both parties are throwing out on the table, and could not agree with more with any of y'all. I agree. It's good to, I agree in the same position that I am, accountability, and I think that we're all looking forward to moving forward with this museum and the future of it for St. Angelo.
When you leave here today, know the great responsibility we're putting on your backs. You have a treasured, historic Santa Fe Depot building which the city owns, and it's a big treasure. And you've had it for $1 a year for 20 years. We need to make sure that you're as committed to it tomorrow and down the road to ensure 20 years or 10 years or whatever the issues are, that we have a depot that isn't stagnant in its conditions
I
or
think
its
the
activity.
group as a whole knows that if it hadn't been for people that helped start this group, we wouldn't have the depot. The depot was offered to the city 3 times, and the city said, no, we don't want it, from the Santa Fe. And it wasn't until a group of people started a campaign, a media campaign, that the city decided, okay, we'll take it, but you all take care of running both the buildings. And that's the way it happened the first 2 or 3 years, until money was found, and then the city took interest in it. But we do
that was
know
BC.
about the importance of saving those buildings.
Before Charlotte.
We can use that.
Okay.
Any other comments, questions, or input? If not, everybody get to work. We've got a lot of work to do on our part, and it looks like you all do too. So we will meet again. We'll have some further conversations.
I appreciate you all having us very much.
Thank you very
Nice
much.
to meet each of
Thank you.
I almost cried when he was telling us that story about the $2 or $1.20 chair. He just started talking about it, and of course the hair on my arm starts raising, and
You know, we want to make sure that those stories are recorded, because what we all know is you never know what's going to happen. And all of us know we have only a certain amount of time and place on this earth, and we don't want any of the great stories and the history and the things that no one else can tell us aren't somewhere documented. We don't want the history and everyone's
Right, to be
time
lost.
and effort to be lost. It's too valuable. So, thank
Who
you.
knows? There could be sightings at the depot. You got any out at the Coliseum?
We are adjourned at, we're done. Now you can visit all you want.
now we do.